I should start by confessing to the fact that I'm both an inveterate liar and have to introduce a lot of people here. So it's rather difficult with I frequently say, we're really pleased to introduce X, who, we wish their kind of plane had crashed while getting here. So one has to kind of, adopt a kind of supplementary discourse to kind of say, I'd like to welcome, but this time I really mean it. And it's quite difficult to find the appropriate discursive form. We are, and I am very pleased to welcome someone who may be a young British artist, but is actually an ancient teacher. So we won't even bring the question of age into the issue. Cerith, I think, trained at the Royal College. I think he's not showing, but for those of you who saw the video work which came, I guess, from the 80s, were already aware that there was someone kind of remarkable, not just as a kind of video artist, but as an artist in video. He was a much-loved teacher here, together with Julia, and like that sort of period, and indeed the dimension of that work, needs not only to be recalled but like advanced within the AA. Since then, obviously, Cerith has been kind of very successful as an independent artist with shows at the White Cube, which have that kind of very beautiful and not only exact but exacting mirror. And those of you who have seen his installation at the Tate Gallery, sort of in support of William Blake, which I spent a whole afternoon at and recognized that it was an incredible delight for what you might call children of all ages. And we're very pleased that he's kind of returned to give an artist talk this evening. I'd like to welcome Cerith Wyn Evans. Thank you.
Okay, I'd like to start off by showing you a small excerpt from really this talk should be called Flying by the Seat of My Pants instead of Cleave, which is what's published in the events list. So we're going to start off with this this short excerpt then. So the first video, please, Joel. It's from, actually I'm not going to tell you where anything is from. People can ask afterwards if they need to know. It needs to be turned up a bit. I think so. Louder if possible. Je peux contre la fenêtre quelque part. Dans des portes de rentre dans l'alterne cliché du disparaît et le vinois
il la retrouva sans déformation apparente. Les mêmes yeux, dans la même pâleur entre deux vies. Seulement, elle était devenue plus fragile. Au premier confin tactile, elle rompait la pudeur. Après, il lui donnait la nuit dans la paume pour s'isoler.
Nous allons tout perdre. Nous ne sommes plus des enfants.
Merci, merci. Et il comptait jusqu'à 50, le temps de refouler ses veines. Depuis, ils avaient tous deux pris du ventre. À la démarche d'orang-outan a fait ça, la patte sur la gueule du petit homme chétif écroulé dans un coin de la cave, un œil sorti de l'orbite et du sang-froid afflua pour se perdre en filets minces sur la chemise de soie blanche. Tu vas parler? Je dis bonheur. Le couple prend sa revanche et franchit la réalité devient réelle. L'homme naît vieillard, meurt fœtus. Quel programme! L'homme naît vieillard, meurt fœtus. Une aube, je coupe les halles à pas parcimonieux. Aller-retour. Tu es réveillée, belle, et tu t'es déjà lavé les dents. Quand les amoureux ne savent pas qu'ils sont des amants, ils font l'amour avec des mouvements sans importance. Ils font l'amour avec... Il est vrai, chaque fille, à bout portant, il était un asthmatique. Il avait un poumon d'acier. Pour l'hygiène, je finis la nuit avec une prostituée vieille, très laide. J'épilogue sur des rudiments indissolubles au déroulement des faits. Il accentuait les équivoques jusqu'à l'outrance de la désolation. Je fossoie ton ventre avec des mains liées. Je t'asphyxie. Nous partageons de l'air vicié. Je tire la chasse sur ma mémoire syphoïde. Persiste un relent de merde. Ah, 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 oh, ah, ah, oh, ah, 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 oh, ah, 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 ah. Fin. Post-scriptum. Te ressemble et me tient sa bouche en haleine près des ruines. Elle parle avec tes mots, renouvelle les situations passées. La vie n'est pas rétrospective.
Okay, thank you. An exhibition would show something, something like a picture. A critical exhibition might find some way of disrupting the scenes that we couldn't walk around it without being reminded of walking about it. But what would an installation in an exhibition be which constantly showed a picture, not the artists, as a disruption of a settled scene? Would this be an extallation in an inhibition? We enter the room and come into the presence of a series of objects whose role in an undisclosed narrative strikes us even before their perception as objects. It was the opposite of a shop. Rather, they were props for a story one had missed. Staring at them as a deaf man might a radio, and yet there was no detail. Each element was the minimum unit which might participate in a series. But a series would go from unit to unit. But a series would go from unit to unit where each unit would be exhibited. But I am in the space of the story I cannot tell, and whose space is not this installation. On the wall is a picture, hung without regard for the graffito it partially obscures. Either the image has not been hung properly in respect to the objects, or the objects are not placed properly in respect to the image. What is the space in which a narrative object meets an image? Somewhere that is out of place, the skew, the hinge in reality, on which the relation of image and object swings. This relation is normally accomplished in the mind. Here it is accomplished in the room in which two spaces flap against each other, image and story, representation and object. This forcing of the space hurts the room into one would like to exit had one not already entered from it. Brainwaves, minute electrical oscillations associated with brain activity, can be measured accurately and graphically, recorded by this is a long word, is electrocencephalograph, EEG machine. EEG shows how that brain rhythms divide into two groups according to frequency. One of these groups, the alpha or scanning rhythms, is strongest when the brain is unoccupied, searching for a pattern, and weakest during purposeful thinking, eyes open, studying a pattern. The strength and type of rhythms may vary between individuals. Variations occur with age. The alpha rhythms do not appear in children until they're about 4 years old. In a bus going to Marseille, we ran through a long avenue of trees, and I closed my eyes against the setting sun. An overwhelming flood of intensely bright colors exploded behind my eyelids, a multi-dimensional kaleidoscope whirling out through space. I was swept out of time. I was out in a world of infinite number. The vision stopped abruptly as we left the trees. Extract from the diary of Brian Gysin, 21st of the 12th, 1958. On February the 15th, 1960, Ian Somerville wrote a letter to Brian Gysin. I have made a simple flicker machine. You look at it with your eyes shut, and a flicker plays over your eyelids. Visions start with a kaleidoscope of colors on a plane in front of your eyes and gradually become more complex and beautiful, breaking like the surf on a shore. After a while, the visions were permanently behind my eyes, and I was in the middle of a whole scene with limitless patterns being generated around me. Following Somerville's later description of the flicker machine, Gysin proceeded to make his own, adding to it an interior cylinder covered with paintings which he had produced along the line of his flicker experiences. Indeed, a number of Gysin's later paintings sprang from his visions experienced in front of the machine. Gysin wrote at this time, "Flicker may prove to be a valid instrument in clinical psychology. Some people see and others do not. The dream machine, with its patterns visible to the open eye, induces people to see. The fluctuating patterns of flickered design support the development of autonomous movies." And we can have the second video, please. Documentation of previous installations: Rome, Paris, Lisbon, New York. Slides and photographs: roof, Casa Grande, and the piece lit. Text: technical specifications, photographs of site in Ostia, prints and negatives. Advice from meeting with Jolyon. Note material sent to Francesco Bonami, follow up. Alison Jacques to liaise with Cristina Perella, Rome. Sources of funding, nature of exhibition, work as part of a series. Publication: contact HUO Caroline CB, structure of the event, structure of the exhibition, confirm text and translation, quotes and specifications from Italian manufacturers, documentary images. Text. Proposal to make a 16mm film documenting an event. Pasolini sets the opening and closing scenes from his film Oedipus Rex in a small provincial northern Italian town, Sacile, specifically on the banks of the Livenza River, the town in which Pasolini was raised. The opening scene of the film set in the 1930s, the closing scene in the late 1960s, corresponding approximately to the time span of the unfolding narrative adapted from Sophocles' Oedipus at Colonus, as well as matching the autobiographical span of time in Pasolini's life. In his screenplay for the film, 1967, he describes in great detail the rural location. Those long afternoons deep in the provinces, only the silence, the emptiness, and the flies of that time of day. On the banks of the Livenza, exterior, day, the spot is a jewel of nature. It was here that Oedipus first distinguished and recognized his mother. The slightest breath of an ancient and inexpressible wind gives life to this pastoral scene. Over its image flows that same musical theme, at once investing the surroundings with its own disturbing meaning, a repetition and a return. Pasolini was murdered on the night of November the 2nd, 1975, in Ostia, the port some 15 miles west of Rome. A small vandalized concrete sculpture commemorates the spot on the Idroscola di Ostia, some 100 yards away from the mouth of the Tiber. Now, as 25 years ago, there is still the football pitch, the fisherman's shanty town of makeshift dwellings, and the rubbish dump consisting of piles of smouldering detritus, all set before the backdrop of the sea, a place the opposite in so many ways to the rural idyll of Sacile. My aim is to make a short 16mm film which would document a small-scale event situated along the Idroscola di Ostia. A text made of fireworks supported by wooden scaffolding would stand on the beach, set at about eye level to the horizon and the sea. The text reads, in translation, "On the banks of the Livenza, silvery willows are growing in wild profusion, their boughs dipping into the drifting waters." The text is appropriated from the screenplay of Oedipus Rex. Parallel narratives are evoked, mapping one history over another as the material presence of the text literally goes up in smoke. Here, an ephemeral and transient gesture is recorded as a mark of respect in an ongoing process of dislocation and relocation. In other words, just another elapsia of time designated. Each body distributes in its own special way, without model or norm, the non-finite and changing totality of its desires. Claim your place in the arena of contradictions where pleasure and reality embrace. Each body distributes in its own special way, without model or norm, the non-finite and changing totality of its desires. Enter the arena of contradictions where pleasure and reality embrace. Here, film projection reflected in the projected text, which reinscribes the image. Cut up, the framed threshold with its implications of temporal and spatial dimensions is a location that negotiates opposing directions, inside and outside, immanence and transcendence, beginnings and endings, sets that may be sacred or profane, though which side of the dialect is which is dependent on the psychic bias of the determining subject. One man's claustrophobia is another's felicitous narcissism. One woman's agoraphobia is another's erasure of self in either void or marketplace. Soon we'll be united for good. I'll lie down and take you in my arms. I'll roll with you in the midst of great secrets. We'll lose ourselves and find ourselves again. Nothing will come between us anymore. How unfortunate that you won't be present for this happiness. CCA, update, information on publication, replace existing images with more recent ones. Send PPP images, ask for copies of installation shots. Press release, ask for chairs to be included in shipping. Cost, Dream Machine to Michael for overhaul, then to Stephen White to be photographed. And the next slides, please. This is difficult to read. Against the background of hearing what one cannot see and seeing what one cannot hear, it is possible to delineate the illusory locus of the metaphysics of presence. Let us return for a brief moment to the difference between hearing oneself speaking and seeing oneself looking. Only the second case involves reflection proper, that is, the act of recognizing oneself in an external image, while in the first case we are dealing with the illusion of an immediate auto-reflection that precludes even the minimal self-distance implied by the notion of recognizing oneself in one's mirror image. One is tempted to assert that the founding illusion of the metaphysics of presence is not simply that of hearing oneself speaking, but rather of a kind of short circuit between hearing oneself speaking and seeing oneself looking. A seeing oneself looking in the mode of hearing oneself speaking, a gaze that regains the immediacy of the vocal self-reflection. That is to say, one should always bear in mind that from Plato's Theoria onward, metaphysics relies on the predominance of seeing. So how are we to combine this with hearing oneself speaking? Metaphysics resides precisely in the notion of self-mirroring, seeing that would abolish the distance of reflection and attain the immediacy of hearing oneself speaking. In other words, metaphysics stands for the illusion that in the antagonistic relationship between seeing and hearing, it is possible to abolish the discord, the impossibility that mediates between the two terms. One hears things because one cannot see it all, and vice versa, and to conflate them in a unique experience of seeing in the mode of hearing. And the third video, please, Joel. Again, good volume for this one. This might be my favorite film ever. Okay, and we can go back to the slides if we could. There is a circle of the touched and the touching. The touched takes hold of the touching. There is a circle of the visible and the seeing. The seeing is not without visible existence. There is even an inscription of the touching in the visible, of the seeing in the tangible, and the converse. Here is finally a propagation of these exchanges to all the bodies of the same type and of the same style which I see and touch, and this by virtue of the fundamental fission or segregation of the sentient and the sensible, which laterally makes the organs of my body communicate and founds transitivity from one body to another. How are we to name, to describe, such as I see it from my place, that lived by another, which yet for me is not nothing, since I believe in the other, and that which furthermore concerns me myself, since it is there as another's view upon me. Here is this well-known countenance, this smile, these modulations of voice, whose style is as familiar to me as myself. Perhaps in many moments of my life the other is for me reduced to this spectacle, which can be a charm. But should the voice alter, should the unwanted appear in the score of the dialogue, or, on the contrary, should a response respond too well to what I thought without having really said it, and there suddenly breaks forth the evidence that out there also, minute by minute, life is being lived, somewhere behind those eyes, behind those gestures, or rather before them, or again about them, coming from I know not what double ground of space, another private world shows through the fabric of my own, and for a moment I live in it. I am no more than the respondent for the interpellation that is made to me. To be sure, the least recovery of attention persuades me that this other who invades me is made only of my own substance. How could I conceive precisely as his colours, his pain, his world, except as in accordance with the colours that I see, the pains I have had, and the world wherein I live. But at least my private world has ceased to be mine only. It is now the instrument which another plays, the dimension of a generalized life which is grafted onto my own. Proposal for Rome train station. Initially, to meet with your request, I should like to propose a small sound installation which could be played in one of the concourse spaces, broadcast over the tannoy at occasional intervals every 2 to 5 minutes. A question is being asked. Has the film already started? In Italian. I hope it is possible to record the voice of the actor Franco Citti to ask the question. I met with him briefly 2 years ago while working on a project in Rome. So, has the film already started? Is the transitional question and the transient nature of the site, the coexistent arrivals and departures of the travellers, waiting. A concentration of interwoven narratives where the point of one person's arrival is the point of another person's departure. The work indirectly evokes Pasolini, notably the cyclical narrative of his film Oedipus Rex, played by Franco Citti in 1967, and the station itself as the location of the final stop Pasolini makes on his journey to Ostia, where he was murdered on the 2nd of November 1975. Has the film already started? A space of possibilities where history and premonition are reinscribed, a fantasy space where fiction and reality embrace. Cleave 00. A computer selects at random poems from the complete poetry of William Blake. The poems are projected in Morse code onto a large, slowly revolving mirror ball. The lamp projects a cone of light just a fraction larger than the mirror ball, creating a penumbra around the shadow of the ball on the far wall of the gallery. A soft, circular rainbow fringe. Program. Calm state, lamp on. Slowly revolving mirror ball, 3 minutes. Lamp fades to black, 15 seconds. Lamp fades up to full, 5 seconds. Active state, lamp on. Shutter open, close to Morse code intervals. Dot, dash, determine relative intervals. Lamp fades to black, 5 seconds. Lamp fade up to full, 15 seconds. Calm state, repeat. The lamp fitting and stand should have an industrial appearance, and the lamp should be as bright as possible. Gallery walls are painted brilliant white floor bare concrete. Palms, 8 to 10, a la Brotairs, are placed in the entrance to the space. Think sci-fi psychedelic ballroom meets crude psychic experiment scenario. Brainwashing, Alphaville, Magic Lantern, Rabbit's Moon, tapping into code, messages from the other side, Ouija board, and it only occurred to me while looking up how Ouija board could be properly spelt that Ouija, the etymology of Ouija, which is extraordinary to me, comes from the French and the German for yes, yes, we and ja, board. James Merrill, Mirabelle, or in this, playing with this, James Merrill's Mirabelle, Mirrorball, books of number. Of colours 12, known on earth, give light in the opaque, placed in the order of the stars where the five senses whelmed, in deluge o'er the earth-born man, then turned in the fluxile eyes into two stationary orbs, concentrating all things, the ever-varying spiral ascents to the heavens of the heavens. They were bent downwards, and the nostrils' golden gates shut, turned outward, barred and petrifying against the infinite. It's from William Blake's Europe. We need new slides for this. It's very raunchy, this next. Actually, that'll do. Since the door was only half closed, I got a jumbled view of my mother and father on the bed, one on top of the other. Mortified, hurt, horror-struck, I had the hateful sensation of having placed myself blindly and completely in unworthy hands. Instinctively and without effort, I divided myself, so to speak, into two persons, of whom one, the real, the genuine one, continued on her own account, while the other, a successful imitation of the first, was delegated to have relations with the world. My first self remains at a distance, impassive, ironical, and watching. Picture on the right-hand side was taken November the 11th last year in Munich, and it's taken during the total solar eclipse there. The citizens of, or the local politicians decided that all streetlights could be turned out for this momentous event, but McDonald's kept their light on, so this is the only photograph I could really take during totality. Okay, if I can find it, I'm going to end with something, and then we can have a chat. Or okay, maybe this first. These are, by the way, not to get into too many anecdotes of production. This is a sign that I nicked from a train which travels from, in this direction, Paris to Vienna, and in this direction from Vienna to Paris. The Mozart Eurocity Express, which in some sense then signs the journey that Sigmund Freud took from Vienna to Paris on his way out. And it struck me that this piece of cardboard, which was in a slot in the train window would sign to people who were inside the train the direction that they were going in. But on arrival in Paris from Vienna, someone's job was to take this piece of cardboard and turn it around and kind of put it back in the window. So it struck me as being almost a kind of, not almost, somehow an absolutely complete metaphor for a kind of drive, or the engine which kind of took the train from one place to another. And there was the sort of fancy that I had about what the life of the person was like, whose job it was to actually kind of take this drive and reverse it, and this kind of oscillating backwards and forwards between Paris and Vienna became interesting. This is monochrome painting, painted in glow-in-the-dark ink. So that's when the light's on. Sorry. And when the light's off, it does that. I had a book light, which I was very fond of because I could go to bed and read. And but the reason probably why the book light kind of got worn out was that of course I would fall asleep and forget to switch off the lamp on the little clip-on thing on the book. It got worn out. So I found this glow-in-the-dark painting, and I thought, well, finally a painting that can actually be practical in a sense. I could kind of charge up the painting and put it behind my head. And so when I brushed my teeth, or just managed to kind of get my clothes off, probably more than brush my teeth, I would go to bed, and I could even kind of read for a few minutes before the picture would kind of cool down and allow me to. So in a sense, then this is a kind of lamp painting. Okay, I'm going to try and find one more thing and read you that. So I want to try and find a suitable set of pictures that this could go with. That'll do. The city is a network of signifiers, a matrix of narratives, intertwined texts buried on the cusp of the perceivable, encrypted. Indecipherable zones of narrativity radiate. The city is intertext, layered and multiple, coexistent and overlaid, contiguous, determining intervals, the silence between intervals, characters, words, sentences, paragraphs, and chapters. High above the city, amid the countless lights, affixed to the highest point of one of the tallest buildings, aircraft warning lights, E08 segnalatori, transmit in Morse code Le Baphomet, a novel by Pierre Tlazowski. Although he had always felt a profound aversion to the instrumental mode, which here offered itself as a means to inform the expired breaths, he told himself that he had been wrong to dismiss its spiritual efficacy on the basis of the device's appearance, to the point of never making use of them. For if these devices seemed too exclusive to favor the physical accidents of informable substance, nonetheless, this itself was by a purely analogical reminder created imperfect but perfectible. These implements, by virtue of their servile function, operated with all the more justice because he himself, a breath, created and thus imperfect, could not raise to so sublime an impartiality as to dispense entirely with their service. Moreover, the instrumental mode was, for the most part, rectified by the presence of a sacred object, which alone was fit to confirm its emblematic character on the entire operation. Mechanically, these devices performed a ritual. They argued thus with no end in sight until the bell pealed. "Be advised," said the radiant beauty, "that your condition will be worse here than down below, for no one will understand you. They will interrogate you, for they also interrogate animals. They will torture you if you don't answer, for they also interpret the muteness of beasts. And they will make predictions from your cries and will not be able to defend yourself. I shall lend you the voice of a child. It belongs to me, and I myself move his tongue." "No, O generous soul, I do not wish to defend myself at all, for if I had to speak again, I should repeat shocking things which you would not dare to utter, were they even imputed to a mere ant-eater. Go on, I shall faithfully translate your thoughts. Charity knows not its own interests, but all that is condemned shall be made manifest, and all that is manifest light. But he whose light is darkness, what darkness?" began to sneer the man who obstinately walked on all fours. Then suddenly the anteater's form covered him completely again, and now only hissing these last words, with his tensile sticky tongue, it attacked the radiant figure, and, too slowly for Ogier's liking, lifted her veils. For her voluptuous splendors had already begun to appear, when Ogier suddenly saw again his own cadaver twitch at the end of a rope, and open wide his staring eyes. He cried out so loudly that he awoke with a start. We're nearly there. I want to find this last little bit, and I can't remember what I put it under. New file is predictably empty. I'm suddenly in mind of the many childhood moments when, for one reason or another, I vowed myself to remember something, or willed to remember it. Specifically, to remember it into adulthood, whether to bear witness to the pains of childhood, or to make myself behave differently towards kids when I was grown up, or just to remember. In particular, I'm now remembering one patch of dirt in my elementary school yard that, wandering around the periphery one recess, of course, instead of playing ball with my classmates, I stood staring at an intensely willing myself, yes, this I will remember. This I will project into the future so that it's there as much as it is here. Just this. Not because it's exceptional, but because it's ordinary. It's nothing. It's dirt, and I will remember it. Perspective, which keeps opening for me, the distance from classmates turning into the creation of an inner space. And wasn't it exactly to that inner space that the attention of the future me, was being trained? Like, this may look like another little kid looking back. You may wonder if she has an inner life at all, but here's proof. Her inner life was powerful enough to conjure you up, long before you existed, and install an entire arbitrary, and hence how signifying, imprint in your memory. An inner space that also, though, was the space of the gesture towards the future. Then, suddenly, I'm crying. to S's mildly interrogative face. I guess I'm responding to the distance between recounting it to you, this story, in this context of being loved and listened to, the distance between this and the form of memory that girl is practicing where no such conditions obtain.
Okay, we'll move to questions in a moment. So I must say I feel compelled to kind of make some comments on the presentation. It's always struck me as kind of odd that Cerith got kind of commandeered into the category of like young British artists, and I'm not here referring to his age. There is something which I think that was shown in a quite remarkable fashion this evening, which differentiates him. In one way or another, and for one reason or another, a great deal of art in the contemporary sense kind of rests itself upon the abject. And I don't even wish to kind of discuss and identify that. It seems to me it ought to be realized. I've always felt that one of the things that characterizes Cerith's work, and which gives it a quite kind of peculiar and insistent and possibly kind of subversive character, is its astonishing commitment to happiness. I think there would be no category in the fine arts or in architecture or whatever which would be more difficult to elucidate or to describe as a kind of happiness. It may indeed, by the end of the 20th century, be one of the most kind of exigent categories, one of the objects of the most profound difficulty. Now, there are kind of empirical ways in which I think, in what we've seen this evening, that you can sort of capture it. I mean, one is his profound indifference to historical changes in representation, so that at one level he could be said to share that, with a certain kind of sensibility in something like Cocteau, minus the sentimentality and plus the kind of historical critique. In the same way that the homage to Pasolini has no kind of profound thing to say about film that came after. On the contrary, it stays exactly with it, but also, I mean, in a way that it's like you're still there after the immolation of the hero in Pierrot le Fou in Rodin. Catastrophic, in a way, immolatory kind of conditions which, without a hint of perverse satisfaction, but which remain kind of absolutely radiant, kind of solar in their happiness, characterizes, I think, the work with plants, the work with images. I think it's an extremely kind of rare representation. Often it takes some work to disentangle it from perhaps what it looks like in order to review it as to what it is. And it is becoming an incredibly singular kind of achievement in which the insistence of a catastrophic happiness of the object becomes itself a strategy which both outflanks, on the one hand, kind of formal innovation, and on the other hand, kind of elaborate narcissism. For myself, I was to be reminded of so many of the works you think was for me like completely remarkable, as I hope it was for you. Do we have some questions?
Don't speak French well enough to say, yes, I speak French. There were 2 camera operators on the Pasolini film. In fact, I'd meant to... it was extraordinary to shoot this film just outside Rome, and I hadn't realized that the footage was going to be processed where most footage is, in Cinecittà, which is a kind of... how am I going to say Mecca without saying Mecca? A kind of extraordinarily loaded place of film production through the Hollywood of Italy. And so it was very exciting to see this footage. And there were 2, as I've said, 2 camera operators. Somehow being there and working with these people who I asked to help me out was really quite extraordinary, because all sorts of amazing coincidences sprang up, and I felt that there was something very uncanny and not a little magical about... I was very nervous about it. I was very anxious about the idea of, for instance, deciding to translate Pasolini. But that translation, it probably relates to the question about speaking French, resides in what became obvious for me was that Pasolini for me was a filmmaker who used subtitles. So to that extent, I think quite a lot of the text that I use is a little like, it's not far away from the way in which subtitles are read when you watch a foreign film. So. So to that extent, it was kind of burning a new subtitle into a film of mine, but a subtitle from... So it's a kind of a displacement. So it was also... I was very anxious about the idea of this translation of going to Rome and saying, no, the firework has to be in English, and people would say, are you completely mad? Pasolini couldn't have been more Italian, and of course, to a certain extent, loathed and understandably the English language because of its influence on Italian culture and language. So I forget their names, Federico, and there was another one who was so impossibly good looking it was almost hard to even make this piece of work, who had in fact won something like the bronze medal at the 1976, and you Olympiad supporters in the room can correct me, was a shot putter for Italy in the Olympics many years previously, but had now kind of given up sports and turns to making films. And the third one, the actor in the Anger Rabbit's Moon, I have no idea who they are. In fact, I only for the first time last night saw it's on the box. Wonderful, thank you. So it's probably for the first time I've even read his name. The Pierrot character, André Soubeyran plays Pierrot, Claude Renevon plays the Harlequin, and Nadine Valence plays Columbine. The film was actually shot in 1950, but not released until 1972, hence the kind of cheesy and brilliant pop soundtrack. I mean, that I think it's really, one of those, Anger is someone for me who's kind of very important and kind of great filmmaker because he understands this kind of, in a sense, then kind of perverse gap between what the image is and what you can do to play around with it, and he's not too respectful of his own, or he's willing to take the risk of putting on of sending it up in a way, of kind of camping it up in that extraordinary way. I think it's one of the most extraordinary little films. I think it's really about cinema, this film. I think the whole Magic Lantern cycle hinges on this amazing film where he makes that kind of relationship between subject and object, between the magic lantern and the moon, and talks about desire and what's allowed and what's not allowed, and the little kind of commedia dell'arte kind of tragedy that happens between the kind of innocent Piero and the other two protagonists who are pretty horrible to him. So it's for me it becomes a kind of metaphor about how the illusion will always let you down, so you may as well sort of get on with it.
I mean, yeah, well, that's right. Because in your own work, it seems to me you're going to approach that moment. I mean, I think anyone who wanted to kind of examine the kind of terrain you work on, you really ought to go to like a room in the Wallace collection of 18th century, in the painting of Henry Luther, where you precisely have staged for you in those paintings scenes which belong either to before or afterwards, but because they both belong, because they belong to both those registers, they all belong to afterwards. And that was the other question I was going to ask you. I mean, traversing anything from, like pasolini film to, formal emblazoned image or something like excerpt. It is about happiness, but it's in a sense about the register of afterwards, even if it happens before.
It's going to be tarty to say yes, absolutely, but something close to that I think is true. Yeah, no, I mean, it's one of the complicated things, and one of the difficult things, one of the embarrassing things about presenting something in this way is then a kind of fear that I have about there being it's sort of essentialized, and you think, well, I'm looking back over several years of different installations and work here, and it's in 35mm slides, and then I kind of kick myself and go, oh no, come on, grow up. It's really about accepting this responsibility of doing it, and then kind of meeting with the audience and taking questions and having a bit of a chat about it. But there's something collapsing about it. There's something.
One way of avoiding the tropes of asking you about the work possibly sort of kind of just answer to ask the eccentric question. Maybe you're a young Welsh artist, and to what extent? I mean, in the mirror exhibition of Like You split the exhibition in a sense between the formal device of the mirror and very direct references to you, not actually kind of as one of those people with kind of short trousers in the 60s, like the Anthony artists, like but very much.
Long trousers in the 60s, what
Yeah.
are you trying to say? Yeah. did this interview the other day with Peter Goodall, who's a great filmmaker and was my tutor at the Royal College while I was studying there, and he recorded the conversation about this show that I did at this project space Fig 1, which ran 50 exhibitions in 50 weeks. It's just finished, and I was a bit surprised by something. 25 pages of typescript stuff arrived from the transcription of the interview, and there's something in there where Peter talks about the question. He talks about something which, if not saying then resolved or irresolvable, he talks about what it is to ask a question and what it is to pose a question by making an installation or creating an experience for the viewer or the listener or whoever it is that kind of walks into the space and meets with the presence of the work. And there's something in there which surprised me, in that I can remember reading this thing and not remember saying it, and feeling slightly pleased with myself, because I said, an answer to that question is not the thing that completes it, in a sense. So there wasn't this equation whereby an answer would be the thing that completes a question. There's another way of somehow kind of dealing with that situation. Yeah. Any more answers?
The pasolini fireworks come to life in the location that they describe. In the creature of White Cube, you have things on the wall there, which is embodiment of the sign. I wonder if there's a context.
Well, in a way, in a funny way, in these situations, all sorts of peculiar coincidences set themselves up, because I'm probably going to remember this wrongly, but and I love these sort of deathbed scenes where you remember Oscar Wilde saying, either the wallpaper goes or I do, or Gertrude Steiner allegedly saying, what's the answer? And she says, what's the question? And then pops off. But in a sense, then this quote from Gertrude Stein I had remembered entirely wrongly, because I felt that it wouldn't be a bad thing then to inject a kind of moment of doubt into this very flashy opening of White Cube Squared, this kind of White Cube Squared, the institution of White Cube going into, let alone squared as a kind of concept. Of course, it's playing on Hoxton Square, but having the sort of little 2 next to the word cube, and the play on all these kinds of spatial associations, then to introduce a kind of moment of doubt, if you like, at the beginning of this review of the star artists of the gallery. So you have, many of them are very good artists, so it was a kind of brave show to put on, in a way, to put all these people who might individually, or their work might argue with each other in the same room. But I felt it was important then to put this sort of suspended text in fireworks that were never meant to be lit in the gallery. So there's this kind of state of sort of suspension of this text, and the text by Gertrude Stein is what I thought was, before the flowers of friendship faded, friendship faded. But exactly, you're right. In the original Gertrude Stein, I thought, well, I better find out where this comes from. And her version is, or her, not version, the original is, before the flowers of friendship faded, faded, faded. So by kind of introducing then this erroneous new syntax, kind of rather changed the whole proposition there. But, slips and accidents are largely to be treasured, really welcomed, in a way. I mean, I think, they're not there. It doesn't come out of the blue. You go looking for it. Thank you very much. Thanks all very much indeed.